Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be talking about healing. We're going to be talking about my experiences in Cataclysm. What is healing like in Cataclysm and why is it so different from retail? We'll talk about retail healing, how it could be improved, is it the best way to heal, and also the war within in terms of what's happening, what's changing. So let's go and get started. This is a discussion video, so I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments. There's no right or wrong answers. So I actually delayed making this video until I actually experienced Cataclysm healing because I didn't get to do that the first time around. So I leveled 2 characters. They're both healers. I did 5-man heroic dungeons, I did 10-man raids, 25-man raids, and I was kind of surprised about how different healing in Cataclysm is versus something like retail. One of my first experiences in Cataclysm was when I leveled my character to 85 and I did a heroic dungeon. I was under geared, I didn't have a lot of spirit, which spirit allows you to have a lot easier mana management. I didn't have a lot of gear and I was thrown into heroic dungeons, and I was surprised about the fact that your healing abilities are not really going to move bars all that much. And let's say, for example, you're doing a heroic dungeon and everyone's at 50% HP. You're kind of doing this triage type of healing where you have to pick members of the group that are in immediate danger of dying and you focus on them and you leave everyone else alone. Again, this is going to depend on the class, your gear, and things like that. And it was weird for me to get used to with this type of healing because, for example, someone's 50% HP and I'm like, they're fine, leave them alone. They're not going to die. I'm going to focus on the tank who's taking all of the damage right now, and I'll get to the other people later on. And in retail, especially if you're pushing high mythical keys, you're trying to keep everyone at 100% HP. Again, it depends on affixes, depends on your group comp, depends if you're tracking defenses and all those things, but the general consensus is you're trying to keep everyone healthy because there might be a possibility of one-shot mechanic happening and you want to make sure that they have the highest chance of surviving that in case it happens. But there was definitely a bit of a shock in terms of the different healing styles that were available in Cataclysm versus retail. Again, I didn't play Cataclysm the first time around. We'll talk about gearing, spirit, and mana management later down in the video because I thought that was very, very interesting in terms of how your character progressed with item levels and extra gear. So imagine my surprise again when I started doing Cataclysm raids in terms of 10-man raids, 25-man raids. Again, the difference between normal and heroic raids can be vastly different in terms of the output that's required, and maybe you're under healing content, maybe you're over healing content. But there were times in raid where the whole raid group takes damage, and they would stay like that for quite a bit because you have to remember your heals, they're not going to top up everyone instantly. It takes quite a bit of time, and that was such a big shock to me versus retail where, again, depending on your group comp, a lot of people are trying to snipe and trying to heal the person as quickly as possible, and that means people get topped up relatively fast versus something like the Cataclysm raids that I experienced. When talking about Classic, I have to talk about tank healing because I've been playing retail so much that I forgot how much focus you need to spend on tanks in something like Cataclysm. Doing 25-man raids, you might have healers who are dedicated to tank healing for specific fights. It is very, very different or far cry from retail, where I remember maining my Holy Paladin in Season 3 for raids, and for fights or certain scenarios where I would play double beacon, I would play it so I could place beacons on squishy DPS rather than tanks because they're basically almost immortal. Now, I don't know how to feel about tank healing because there were times in retail where tanks were weaker and a lot of tank players were complaining about that because they didn't want to rely so much on healers. So guys, I really want to know your opinions about this specific section of healing in terms of tanks requiring your attention. Do you want that to come back in retail, or do you like the way that it is right now? Leave a comment below. And this brings to the second part of the video: which style is actually better, more fun to play? So now we'll talk about Mythic Plus in terms of retail, in terms of how it works, in terms of the scaling. You have to remember that in Cataclysm, the heroic dungeons, that's as hard as it gets. There is no scaling. In retail, you have scaling, and the hierarchy you do, the more HP mobs have, the more damage they deal, and that's where you're starting approaching certain key levels where your boss mechanics or trash mechanics, unavoidable mechanics, start to almost one-hit you. And that's where you get certain classes who don't have a lot of defensives. They're starting to suffer in terms of not getting invited to hierarchies. And the meta becomes like you have this god tier that provides the most buffs, have strong survivability. Is that the best way to approach Mythic Plus healing when it comes to creating this, again, one-shot survivability type of meta that exists after the last seasons? Is that going to provide you with the most enjoyment as a healer? I really, really want to know your opinion because there is no right or wrong answer here. I'm just kind of wondering, do you like the one-shot meta that you see in these really high keys? Because healers have to keep everyone topped up because they want to give them the highest chance of surviving. So my proposal, again, really want to know your opinion on this. Let's say in Mythic Plus, your HP, your group's HP would scale up with the key level. So let's say, for example, you're doing a plus 15, plus 16, plus 17, and your HP would be a lot higher. That means that boss mechanics, unavoidable boss mechanics or unavoidable trash mechanics would not really get you that close to dying or that one-shot kind of area. Instead, it'll bring you to something like 50% HP. But you as a healer would have to spend a lot more time healing up that HP because everyone's health pools are going to be a lot bigger. And this is something that I thought about for a long time because I made a video about healer damage, healing, and things like that, which kind of exploded. People really had a lot of opinions about this, and a lot of people made their voices really clear in terms of, I want to spend more time healing as a healer. And with this kind of fix, you would have to spend a lot more time healing people. There's going to be a lot less one-shot mechanics. And I'm not talking about egregious one-shot mechanics in terms of failing a boss mechanic, standing in a swirly. Those are still going to be existing. Those are still going to be core part of Mythic Plus and raiding and things like that. You can't stand in fire and survive that, right? But in terms of unavoidable damage, they're not going to get you to that, again, one-shot area as much. And as a healer, you would have to spend more time healing and actually providing that triage type of healing in terms of focusing on members that are in immediate danger of dying, somewhat similar to Cataclysm. How do you feel about that? Now, this would not be an easy fix because there's a lot of classes out there who scale based on their HP. There's a lot of healers who heal based on HP. Preservation Evoker is actually one of the prime examples. So this would actually require a lot of kind of like reworking certain abilities or changing the scaling. There's a couple of other things that people are suggesting in terms of the scaling of Mythic Plus dungeons, in terms of every time you do higher dungeon, the mob is going to get more HP and it's going to increase in its damage. What if Blizzard lowered the damage output or lowered the scaling of damage output of mobs, which means there would be less one-shot mechanics happening? But that would probably cause more issues as well, because maybe people would focus more on healer DPS. People might bring those 4 DPS comps and all those things. So I'm not sure if there's a perfect solution out there. I'm just kind of thinking out loud in terms of, do I want another survivability one-shot meta in Mythic Plus Dungeons to happen in the War Within? Do I want something a little bit more different in terms of healers focusing more on healing or having a bit more of that triage healing and things like that? But let's not forget, Blizzard has actually tried multiple different design choices throughout expansions and even throughout Dragonflight, and we'll focus on Season 2, which honestly, they tried something different and it really backfired to an extent. Season 2 Mythic Plus healing will probably go down as the most hated season out there. So many of my healer friends re-rolled to DPS or just downright stopped playing. So what was the issue in Season 2? First of all, your spot healing for majority of the healers was extremely weak in terms of you had to cast multiple heals to get someone from the brink of death to top HP or to top them up. I don't hate this idea. This actually happens in Cataclysm all the time. I'm actually very familiar with this right now because I've been playing Cataclysm quite a bit. I don't hate this idea at all. I actually feel this could actually be built upon in the future and actually create more interesting healing. What I hated is the fact that they reworked Holy Paladin, and Holy Paladin had monopoly on spot healing, so every healer hated Holy Paladin or had to reroll to Holy Paladin. You also had issues where Mythic Plus damage was still scaling in such a way that if you don't top up people to 100% HP, they're going to die from a one-shot mechanic, and now you're playing healers where it takes you so much longer to bring everyone in terms of spot healing or to bring everyone to that, you know, safety levels. So now you create this super anxiety-driven environment where you're playing healers, majority of the healers, with the exception of Holy Paladin, you're playing healers which have to struggle with their spot healing, but you need to struggle with the spot healing because if you don't, people will die. Imagine the case if in Season 2 Blizzard decided to tune or balance enemy mob damage, that you as a healer would have more time to top up players, so there would be less one-shot mechanics. I think Season 2 would be viewed in a far more favorable light. Instead, Season 2 will be viewed as the season of missed opportunities in terms of poor scaling, in terms of class balance. It was so bad that there were so many people who were complaining about Mythic Plus healing, and Blizzard even did a complete 180 in Season 3 and Season 4 in terms of how they approached healing. And before I'm going to finish the video, I want to talk about Spirit. I want to talk about mana management, because mana management is... Okay, I've been playing Cataclysm, and Cataclysm has Spirit. Spirit is going to improve your mana management, and the way, and this is going to be my personal experience, I am really loving character progression in Cataclysm right now, because the more gear you get, the more spirit you get, you really feel your character progressing, getting stronger. The more gear you get basically means more healing you can do, more casts you can do. And I feel like you can really kind of experience that character growth, which I think is really, really fun because I really love getting gear and I really love getting stronger. In retail, you don't really get that feeling right now because your mana management is not really tied into gear as much. Don't get me wrong, the more gear you get, the higher item level you get, the more healing you will do, which means you might have to cast less heals, which is, again, a way of creating easier mana management. In Cataclysm, you kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of getting more gear. It means you can do more healing, but you also getting more casts because of your spirit or increase in spirit. And I actually kind of like that because in retail right now, it would be fine if mana management would be somewhat equal for all the healing specs out there, but it's not. There are certain healers that have a lot of mana issues and there are certain healers who have very little mana issues. A perfect example for me right now in retail, I'm playing Resto Druid in raids, and Resto Druid in raids is stuck in such a weird position where a lot of the top end parsing Resto Druids might be using mana trinkets from the previous seasons in terms of 7th Spine. They might be using time walking trinkets like Spark of Hope, and that kind of makes me think, okay, certain healers can struggle with mana depending on the content you're doing, and other healers are not. So this got me thinking in terms of if you cannot balance every single healer in terms of how their mana feels, why not let players gear through mana? Why not let players get that additional mana through item levels and things like that? But that is a big if right now. That's just something that I experienced in Cataclysm because I just felt character progression was done a little bit better in Cataclysm, specifically for healers, because getting extra spirit, more spirit just felt quite powerful. But of course, spirit is not perfect either, because what happens later down the line with more patches and more gear, spirit might mean that mana management is going to be completely irrelevant. You're going to have infinite mana, and that it goes against Blizzard's design choices in the last couple expansions and seasons, because they want mana to be a resource for everyone. Which is, again, on paper, this is perfectly fine when all the classes are made equal in terms of mana management and they feel good to play around mana as a resource, which is not true. So why not shift this issue to the players in terms of gear itemization and let them decide how much mana they need? So the summary of the video, should retail healing be fixed? Maybe it's perfectly fine right now. Do I want to go through other seasons of Mythic Plus where survivability and one-shots are going to be very, very prevalent the higher keys you go? Do I want to experience a little bit different? Do I, like, in my eyes, I'm really enjoying Cataclysm healing right now because I think it's a breath of fresh air in terms of allowing players around you stay not topped up and allowing them to be like, you're fine, I'm gonna get to you, just stay, like, you're 50% HP, that's fine, you're not gonna die, I'm gonna focus on other players and then I'm going to get to you. And I think that kind of triage healing is kind of interesting, but maybe that's kind of like, you know, something new to me. I didn't get to experience Cataclysm initially, so what would you want to see in the War Within? Do you want the, again, in Mythic Plus, the one-shot, the survivability method to continue, or do you want something different? And in terms of character progression, do you want mana management through item levels to come back? Because right now, there isn't a whole lot of choices, and you get, again, you get situations where healers are using gear from previous seasons in order to improve their mana management. How do you feel about this video? If you like it, like and subscribe. This is a discussion video, so I want to read your comments. I want to read your thoughts. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next guide.